In this question, you are given that a ray of light moves parallel to the base of the prism and the refractive index of the prism is given. See, the important point to remember is when it moves parallel to the base of the prism, so that is a condition for minimum deviation. The angle of incidence and the angle of emergence are both going to be equal. So say this is the ray and this emerges parallel to the base of the prism, and the angle of the prism is 60 degrees since it's an equilateral prism. Now you know that the refractive index is sine A plus D by 2 over sine A by 2. So in this case the angle A is known, A is 60 degrees, the refractive index is known, which is root 3, and you can find out D from this equation. So once you have the value of D, which works out to be mu into sine A by 2, you have sine of A plus D by 2 equal to this, and once you work this out, this comes out to be 60 degrees. Then you know that for minimum deviation, D is equal to 2i minus A. So you put the value of D as 60, you know the value of A over here is 60, then I works out to be 60 degrees. Now let's take a look at both the conduction current and the displacement current during the charging up process. During the charging up process, a current will flow over here, which is given by IC, and the charge on the capacitor is going to grow from 0 to a maximum value of Q. This means that the electric field between the plates of the capacitor is also a changing electric field. This gives rise to the displacement current, which is given by epsilon naught d phi E over dt, where phi E is the electric flux. Now, during the charging process, the conduction current and the displacement current have to be equal to each other. This can be proved because if you consider a point P over here, just outside the plates of the capacitor, and you consider a loop like this, to find out B, you have integral B dot dl is mu naught times the current I. So in this case, you have a current I which is flowing through this loop. But if you take a different surface, say you take a surface like this, which has the same boundary, then to get the same value of V, the magnetic field at the point P, the conduction current and the displacement current have to be equal to each other. The situation is much simpler for the second part of the question. In that case, the capacitor is already fully charged. So when the capacitor is fully charged, the conduction current is going to be 0 and the displacement current is also going to be 0 since there is no changing electric flux between the plates of the capacitor. The question says that the DC source and the AC source both have the same voltage. Let us just make an assumption. Let's say that the DC source is 220 volts and the RMS value of the AC source is also 220 volts. In that case, the heating is going to be given by I square R times T. So the rate of heat production will be equal to I square R. Now for the first case, when we are using a DC source, then the rate of heat production H by T can be written as I square R, which we can write as V square over R. See, but normally whenever you have to find out the heat produced or dissipated, you need to use this formula and don't use this formula for heat production. Over here, since we are given the voltage, we are writing this in terms of the voltage. Now for the second case, for the DC source, the heat produced is going to be I RMS square times Z. Since the electric heater is a coil and a coil will have an inductance in addition to a resistance. So the total impedance Z is going to be under root R square plus omega L square. So the value of Z is going to be more than R, which is the DC resistance. Now we'll write this, since we want to compare the rate of heat production in terms of the voltages. So we'll write this as V square over Z, and you can see that this has a smaller value than V square over R. So the heat produced for the AC source will be less than the heat produced for the DC source. The question says that we need to find the time in which 50% of the sample would get decayed, and we are given the mean life of a radioactive sample. Now, if you just recall, the mean life is the time during which the number of radioactive nuclei that remain are 1 by E times the original number, whereas the half-life is the time in which the number of radioactive nuclei that remain is half the original number of nuclei. So if you notice, in both these formulae or in both these definitions, it's not a formula, this is just a definition. This is the number that remains and not the number that decays. Now the question says that you have to find the time in which 50% of the sample decays. So if 50% of the sample decays, then what remains is also 50%. Had the question said that 75% of the sample decays, then 25% would have been left. So then N would have been 25%. So coming back to our question, N is equal to 50 over 100 times the original, which means what we need to find out is the half-life, given that the mean life is Tm. Now let's look at a relation between the half-life and the mean life. The half-life is given by 0.693 times the mean life. So the answer for this question would be 0.693 times the mean life. A photodiode is operated in reverse bias mode so that the change in current due to the optical signal can be detected. For instance, if you have a PN diode and say this is forward biased. Now, if this is forward biased, then the current flowing through this would be in milliamperes. Now, when an optical signal is incident, then electron hole pairs are created due to this signal, and a small amount of current in microamperes would get added to the already flowing majority current. Now this small current is extremely difficult to detect. In reverse bias, there is a small current which is in microamperes, and this current is due to the minority charge carriers. Due to the incident light, there will be an additional current which is also in microamperes. So the fractional change in current is more in this case rather than in this case. So it is preferred to operate a photodiode in reverse bias mode. Next, arranging the intensities in decreasing order of magnitude would be I4 is greater than I3 is greater than I2 is greater than I1. You can see that the current is more for this case than for this and least for 1. So if the current is least for 1 and most for 4, which means maximum number of electron hole pairs are being created for 4. So the intensity of the incident light is maximum for 4 and minimum for 1. for questions like this where you are asked to draw the wavefront, it's easiest to first draw a ray and then to draw a wavefront which is going to be perpendicular to the ray. Wavefront, and this is a ray. So if this is the ray of light and then this is the wavefront, they're going to be at 90 degrees with each other. The first part of the question is, say you have a prism and you have an incident ray, this is the refracted ray and this is the emergent ray. Now I'll just show this with blue. So this is the incident wavefront which is at 90 degrees to this ray, and this is the emergent wavefront which is again at 90 degrees to the ray. The second part of the question is for a convex mirror. So we'll first draw a convex mirror and we have a ray of light which is incident. So now say this is the focus, so this gets reflected from here, and similarly this appears to emerge from the focus and this gets reflected like this. Now this would be an incident wavefront, this would be a reflected wavefront, and this too would be a reflected wavefront. Similarly, you can have a number of wavefronts and you can see that this is a part of a surface. So this is the reflected wavefront. At the maxima, the two amplitudes add up, so the intensity at the maxima can be written as A1 plus A2 whole square. Actually, this is proportional to A1 plus A2 whole square, and the intensity at the minima is proportional to A1 minus A2 whole square, because at the minima the two waves are out of phase with each other. So a ratio can be written as the ratio of the maxima intensity at maxima to that at the minima is A1 plus A2 whole square by A1 minus A2 whole square. Now when one of the slits is covered by a transparent paper so that only half of the light intensity gets transmitted, that means if the original light which was coming through is I, now this has become I by 2. Now if I corresponds to an amplitude of A, and you know that the intensity is proportional to square of the amplitude, I is equal to K times A square. So if the value of I changes to I by 2, that would mean if you just write the changed amplitude as A dash square, then A dash becomes A by root 2, which is approximately 0.7 times A. So now if you look at the maxima and the minima, say one of the amplitudes is A, then the other would be 0.7 A, and they get subtracted at the minima. So you would have 1.7 A square over 0.3 A square. Now originally when the transparent paper was not placed, the intensity at the maxima was proportional to 2A square and the intensity at the minima was 0 because the two waves completely cancel each other out. So which means now after placing the transparent paper, the intensity at the maxima gets reduced, whereas the intensity at the minima increases. Now let's take the x, y and the z axis. Say this is the x, the y and the z axis, and we have two charges placed, one at A 0 0. So let's consider this as one position. So this is A 0 0 and you have a charge 2q placed here and the other charge is placed at 4A 0 0, which means the y and the z coordinates are 0 and it's placed on the x-axis, and you have a charge of negative q placed here. Now you have to find the ratio of the flux through two concentric spheres, and the radius of this first sphere is 2a, which means it's going to be somewhere over here. So this is the first sphere, and then you have a second sphere which has a radius which is 8a, and they're centered on the origin. This is the largest sphere of radius 8a. Now to find out the electric flux, we need to use Gauss's law, and Gauss's law states that integral E dot ds, or the electric flux, is given by 1 by epsilon naught times the charge enclosed by the surface. Now if you look at this first surface of radius 2a, then the charge enclosed by this surface is twice q. So the flux through the first surface is going to be 1 by epsilon naught times 2q, because the charge enclosed is 2q. And when we consider the flux through the second surface 2, which has a radius of 8a, then the total charge which is enclosed is the sum of this and this. So the total charge enclosed is 1 by epsilon naught times 2q and minus q, which becomes q over epsilon naught. This means that the ratio of the flux through the first surface to the second surface is 2:1. The ratio is going to be 2:1. So if you notice, the outer surface has lesser flux through it than the inner surface, because you can consider that over here you will have some field lines which are in the outward direction, because this is a positive charge, whereas due to the negative charge you have some field lines which are in the inward direction, which means they're going to cancel each other out, and effectively the flux through the outer surface is q by epsilon naught. Best of luck for your exams, and most important, eat a good nutritious breakfast in the morning before the exam, because you need a lot of energy to do your physics paper well. Best of luck. Do well.